Hello and welcome to AntRC. It's Terry here, and this is an update from the MC6 Have I Stripped the Gears video. I initially said I hadn't because the small gear in the axle during that video was still actually in the axle. I hadn't taken it out. But have a look at this little gem. So you can see here it's absolutely, well, I say absolutely, it's difficult to see in the light. There we go. It's properly munched. Now it hasn't taken the teeth right off, but there are definite parts of it here that kind of eroded away and missing. So I will put a clip up very quickly of the noise it was making.
Yeah, it's a gearbox.
And I couldn't understand when I initially did that video, you know, the strip down video, what was making that noise, because it sounded like gears, and this is obviously what it was. So this is the small gear from axle number 2, which was where the issue appeared to be. So the drive shaft that leads to axle 2 straight from the gearbox. So that's obviously game over. So it was the actual, these are brand new gears that are in here. And the gears looked okay, to be fair, but they looked a little bit worn. I don't want to use them again, hence the new ones. So this video is mainly about how to try and stop this from happening. Now, I made a mistake in the previous video about shimming, and I'd just forgotten because it had been a while since I'd built the MC6, and I'm also going to tell you about what I've done to take play out of this axle. I've done something different and messed around with it a little bit. So let's look at the manual, and that's the bit I made a mistake on. So here we go. So this is axle 2, and it does actually say here, when you put the small gears on, where is it? It's there. That there should be a shim in there. 72007. And when I looked at the manual, I had a sneaking suspicion that I was wrong when I did that video, and I went back and checked, and I was wrong. So this is the C-clip that goes over the end of the drive shaft here, or the shaft that comes out of the axle, and there should be a shim. Now, when I built it the first time, this was my first kit, I didn't put that shim in place because I didn't have it in the kit. So I don't know whether it was missed out or what, and I thought, well, maybe it's an option part, because you have shims at the side here that go on to this, the crown gear. There's shims that go in there, and I thought, well, maybe you don't need it. But of course, what a stupid thing to say. Of course you need it. And what happened was that there was quite a bit of backwards and forwards play. So the C-clip goes in that little groove in here, and the shim goes in front of it, or wherever you want on this shaft, as long as it's before the C-clip, and it stops play in and out. Now, because I didn't have a shim in there was always a fair amount of play on this here, this small gear. So what I think's happened is the drive shaft was loose, coming loose, and I think maybe the vibration of it coming loose or it moving was moving this shaft back and forth, meaning that it was pulling the small gear away from the crown gear, and hence that's why it started to strip. That's my conclusion. I could be wrong, but I'm you know, feel free to put in your opinion if you think it's something else. So going on from that, to stop that from happening, I have shimmed. Now I got the shims from Green's Models, but you can get them from anywhere. I'll put a link in the description. There's a 0.3mm shim in there. It's a 5mm shim, the diameter of this shaft, and the thickness of the shim is 0.3mm. And what that's done, if you can see, is there is no play. It's hard to see in there at all. It's not, whereas before there was lots of play. And what that also means is, you can't really see in there because of the light, that the gears are meshing really nicely in there. They're turning really smoothly, which is great. There's no movement. So I've also, as per the manual, which I always had done, put shims either side inside this bearing to stop, you know, sideways movement here. So that's good. So that doesn't move. So the crown gear is locked in place nicely. The other issue I've always had was sideways movement. I always had lots of play from this shaft going into the crown gear here. There was loads of movement. There's a tiny bit of movement now, but it used to move so much that you'd get this kind of knocking, clanging against the metal kind of hex hub that you put on the end here. And that has stopped. Now, what's funny is that the manual only mentions a bearing here and here. So if I go to the part of the axle which has got grease in it, it's difficult to see, which isn't filled, there's space for a bearing there. There's also space for a small bearing here, and then you've got the big crown gear bearings. So what it was before, I had a bearing here and here, but not these bearings there. There was a space for them, and I checked the manual, double checked, and it doesn't say to put a bearing in there, but why have a space? Maybe because you can put a bearing in there. So I put 2 shims on here to try in the space behind the bearing to try and stop this sideways movement, because that can't be helping either. If this is rocking about and moving, then it's got to have an effect on the crown gear, which also would move this, and the whole thing is just, you know, a bit of a mess. So I decided, well, I need to shim here as well, because this took out some of the play, but not completely. So by adding a bearing in here and putting a shim on here as well, there is, let me put the axle together, there is very little play here. See if we can get the camera to focus. There is very little play. You can get the light right. Tiny bit, but not much. And I had 3 times that play. It was really bad on how it was originally. And again, if you know here, there's no play in there at all. And it sounds nice. I mean, I'm wearing a lapel mic, so you may not be able to hear that, but it's spinning lovely and free. I haven't greased it yet because I haven't put it together. But I wanted to do this video in case, well, one, to, you know, look at the conclusion and dig further down into what had happened to the original gear noise, that it obviously was damaged, and my method of trying to take play out of the axle and trying to stop any stripping in the future. We'll see if it works, don't know, but it should, without all that play in the gear in the axles, it should run a lot better. Fingers crossed. So the build continues. I will update when it's gone back together, and we'll also test the speed of the 55 turn motor that I've put in. The motor's installed, it's sitting, the gearbox is back in the chassis, but obviously it's got no axles in, so I can't test it. So I will do another update video in due course. Thanks for watching all. I hope this helps you. Also, whether anyone else has put extra bearings in here or not. If you've got a space for it, I know bearings are quite expensive, but it's definitely helped with play. So fingers crossed it runs better. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Stay safe. Please like and subscribe, and bye for now.